is the introduction to the Defender exercise. So 4.2, those are the 6 levels where you are both attacking. And then after your attack, doing the forensic analysis afterwards. It actually makes sense to do Defender intro before those 6 levels, but the way we have this organized right now, they're in separate modules. So I'm going to talk about Defender intro, and this is just a level that to get you familiar with the logging infrastructure that is supported in these cloud services. It's really quite nice, actually, because there's so much log data in the cloud. You really need good tooling to be able to analyze your logs. You don't want to be spending your time collecting logs across different machines and writing tools to parse the logs and then writing your own query system to analyze the logs. You would prefer that the platform provider do all of this for you. And this is one of the reasons why you might go to the cloud, is to have these tools available to you so you can analyze the infrastructure that you have deployed to run your service. Okay, so this is the ThunderCTF Defender level. It starts with this really simple softball level just to get you used to the tools. And much like the ThunderCTF exercise, the first thing to do is to create a new project. That sort of limits the amount of log data that you're going to be having to navigate. If you just create a new one, run these levels, and then all of the log data in the back end is just for this particular exercise, which makes things easier. Okay, so one of the things you would do is you would go ahead and when you launch Cloud Shell, which is what I'm going to do now. And typically when you launch Cloud Shell, the project ID is by default set to the project that you have active, that you are currently selecting. And so this you can see is in the parentheses here when I log in. This Cloud Shell, the project ID for this Cloud Shell. This instance of Cloud Shell is Defender intro, which is what I intended to do. If it's something else, or if it's not set, then you have to do a gcloud config set project to be the project that you want. And this is what they tell you here as well when you're in Cloud Shell. So that's the first thing. The second thing is to set up your virtual environment and activate it for the Python code that you'll be running, because you're going to run our Python code to launch all the levels here, just like in the other ThunderCTF levels. And then you're going to clone the repo for the exercise, go into this directory, install all the packages that we require to deploy the infrastructure on Google Cloud. And then what you're going to do is you're going to run this Python Thunder activate project. And what this is going to do is going to activate all of the backend services that the CTF is going to need in order to run the levels, all the infrastructure there. And you've seen this in the prior ThunderCTF exercises. One other thing that this thing asks you to do is to enable detailed logging on certain services. And typically, if you're running a particular service that needs to adhere to sort of compliance regimes where you're forced to log all the data accesses and retain it for a certain number of months, then you'd want to turn on detailed logging so that if something happens, like if a data breach happens, you can identify at a very fine granularity all the affected pieces of data. And that's where on a project you would want to enable. And because this entire exercise is about trying to figure out what has happened on a project, we want all of this stuff enabled so that we can do some exploration. So when you finish activating the project, one of the things you should do is go to the IAM and admin section of the project and go to the audit logs just to make sure detailed logging has been turned on. And so here's a picture of the UI that you can see. Zoom open here. You can see detailed logging for Cloud Functions, the Resource Manager, Compute Engine, Storage, and IAM have been enabled. I can show you this here, what it looks like. I'm going to go through here and make sure that this thing, I've already run this, so on this particular project, but I want you to know what this looks like so that you make sure that this is turned on for you. Otherwise, none of these log entries will show up for you. So if I sort by admin read, eventually it'll show up that all of these have been enabled. Sometimes you have to, this interface takes a while to load all of the entries. It's basically a static front end that's using a bunch of REST API requests to fill in this table. but each one of these is a separate request. So that's why you saw I brought it up and I had to keep on refreshing it until eventually it gave me all of these services are enabled. All right, so there is that. And so that looks good and we are ready to run. And so for this particular project, it's a trivial project, trivial level. So I decided I'm just going to do this live and in person. So that's the command to instantiate this level. So I'm going to do this. So I'm in this, sorry, I need to, I have instantiated my environment for ThunderCTF in this Defender intro directory, and then within there I have ThunderCTF. So within this directory, I am going to run the script. Oops, excuse me. Hang on a second. There's one thing I forgot to do before. So I forgot to activate. I've already installed the requirements and the packages. I forgot to activate it. And then I'll go into ThunderCTF and then start this level. So I'm going to pause here as this thing deploys. Whoops, didn't quite work. Hang on a second. Okay, so I'm ready to deploy. So what I've done was I've configured my environment. I activated the, I configured it, I activated it, installed all the packages in there, and activated the project. You saw the audit, detailed audit logging has been enabled. So now I'm going to deploy this thing. So I'll just copy this command and then deploy it in my environment. And then wait for this thing to deploy. It deploys pretty quickly, so I'm going to keep the video running. And then what this does is it deploys the level, and then it actually performs the quote unquote compromise all in one. And then your job is to analyze the log data after this level has been deployed and compromised. Now, one of the things that you're going to want to do is to limit the time range of the log data that you want to access, and we'll look at that next. So the centralized logging, the place where you can go find the logs is right here at this URL. So I can actually go and visit it in the UI, which is what I'm going to do next. And then one of the things in the in the level itself is that after you deploy the level, the instructions of the level are actually in the start message. So I'm going to go back into Cloud Shell and then examine the message that is there. Like, what is the point of the level? So I'm going to go and examine that thing. So it's in the start directory within ThunderCTF. And if you look, the intro file is intro.txt, and it says the access key in the start directory has been leaked. Find the bucket accessed through the leaked key and the service account bound to it. And so they're giving you that somebody has found this thing, and you're trying to figure out what was this key used for, and the service account that belongs to this key. So if you take a look at this key, you can see it's a service account. You can see this is the key ID. This is its private key. It's associated with this service account. So there's the answer to one of those questions. And all right, so then your job is to go through the log data and figure out where this key was used. And so you can actually just copy and paste the key ID and then search the logs for it. So that's the goal of the level. Let me quit out of here because I'm done. When you bring up the Logs Explorer, you can confine the amount of logs that you're looking at using this this time range selector. So I just deployed this level, so I'm going to enter a custom range. And so it's basically within the last, I'll say, what is it? 12 p.m., 12:10 p.m. Is the start time, and then the end time will be 12:24. Let me get all the log data from this time range, and that was the range where I deployed the level, so it just restricts. Now, obviously, in a real situation, you'd be looking at the entire range of log data, but I don't want to frustrate you too much with looking at a whole bunch of log files that you don't necessarily need. And there's a lot of log files, so even for like that 10 minutes, you're like, oh, there's a huge number of entries here for me to look at to see if anything got leaked in there. But we have a mission. We're like, okay, the leak key has that certain ID. So one of the things you can do is just paste that leak key straight up into the query field of Logs Explorer. And what this does is basically acts as a grep that greps all of the log entries for this string. It's a simple string search. You could actually do a more structured query. So you could actually give it filters where you're looking for different field names to be set to different values. And you can see those here. When you highlight individual log entries, it'll say, oh, this log entry has this particular value, proto payload authentication info principal email, to be set to a particular name. And so this is more of a structured JSON file data format that you can actually query based on attribute fields. We're not going to do that. We're going to say, you know what, that's the key that got leaked. I'm just going to search for that wherever it got used or wherever it shows up. So I'll run this query. And you can see there are two things here, and both of these things are what I want you to examine for the code lab. The first one is I want you to go and take a look at this, the top entry. So there's two entries here. There's one that's the most recent. This is 12/24/21, and then the one that's earlier is 12/24/17. The first task is to say, well, look at this first entry and find the principal email, the service account that was used to perform the action in this log entry. And then what was the method name? So what was the action itself? So let's expand this thing out. And we give you the actual path in the payload. It's like the proto payload, the authentication info, and then the principal email. And so you can see this is the service account that was used. And we saw this in the JSON file itself. And then this is the service account key name. So it identifies this as being, this is why that query returns this particular thing, because that string actually appears as the service account key name that was used to access this thing. And then the method name is what action did it perform? Well, it did a storage buckets.get. And then, well, what bucket did it get? Well, that's what the resource name is. So it actually got this this intro bucket 717377. So that's the bucket that was asked for. Then it asks you to expand the second entry. And so this is an IAM entry. And so what is this entry? If you expand this out, this is where the service account key got created. And so this was part of us launching the level. In order to launch the level and populate it with interesting things to find, as the owner, which is when I actually issued the Python Thunder create, as the owner, I am basically deploying all of this infrastructure onto the project. And you can see that in the log entries. And one of the things that I did when I did that Python script is part of that Python script creates the service account key that then is used to access the bucket. And so that's what this is. This is the account, the service account key setup for this. And this is what the code lab is asking you to do. One of the things that you would do if you know that the service account key has been used inappropriately, so for this one, say this should never have happened, then what you would want to do is do some kind of remediation. You would want to clean up this key if it's been used by someone else. And I'm going to show you how to do this in the UI. You can go to IAM admin and then go to the service accounts in IAM admin. And then within this service account, you can basically see, oh, there's the service account in question that's got the compromised credential. And you can see that there's a key ID that matches the one that got compromised. So if I click on this thing and then I go to this the set of keys, I can see that this key is there. And then what I would want to do is delete this. And you can delete this from the UI, or there are G-Cloud commands that allow you to list keys and delete them as well, which you'll see in the next set of levels, the Defender audit levels. So that's what I'm going to do. And then after that, now that this finishes the exercise pretty much, it gives you an idea of how the thing works. What I'll end up doing is just destroying the level. So I'll do a Python Thunder, Python Thunder destroy, and it just destroys whatever level Thunder currently has in its. It basically, all of this is done through deployment manager, and you can only have one deployment at a time for this particular ThunderCTF setup. So then when you say destroy, it just gets whichever one you currently have active. The other thing that you should do is you should delete the project itself, since you don't need it anymore. So as soon as this is done, I'll then delete the project. So now that's done. I'm going to go back. I'm going to go to the home dashboard part of this project, and I'm going to go and delete this project because I don't need it anymore. And so I'll go to project settings. I'll say shut this project down. And then they just ask you if you're sure, type in the name. And then this will shut it down and take it off of my billing account. So it allows me to do other things with that money.